afternoon, everybody. It's Greg from Low Country Paddle Sports. Welcome to our second video on boat maintenance. And we're going to discuss 4 separate areas today. I'm going to split the videos up based on each category. First thing that we're going to do today is we're going to go ahead and work on inspection of the exterior shell, followed by the interior cockpit area, safety and storage, and directional aids. By that I mean if your boat is equipped with a skeg or a rudder. None of my boats have rudders, but they do have skegs. We're going to talk about how to service those. So stay tuned. We got a lot to cover, and hopefully you'll learn something. Hey, this is Greg back with you. All right, so exterior shell. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to do a walk-around inspection of our boat. We want to go ahead and check it on the top and as well as the bottom, and also concentrate on the sides as well. So what I usually do is I'll start at the bow, and I'm just going to be basically looking at the top deck for any imperfections. You know, don't be afraid to run your hands over it. What you want to do is you want to look at your contact points, any hard contact points. You want to make sure that all of the fasteners are patent. You want to look at your bungees. In this case, what secures my my forward grab loop. Make sure that the bungee is still good and pliable. And then we're going to work our way down. We're going to look at our deck lines. We want to inspect our deck lines, and we want to make sure that these don't show any signs of wear or dry rot, especially for those folks that leave their boats out in the sun and the weather all year long. One thing that we're going to do too, as we work our way down, our attachment points for our bungees as well, and our safety lines or our deck lines. We want to make sure that the screws aren't rusted, and also to come back in here with a screwdriver and tighten these guys. And also, usually I'll loosen them a little bit, and then I'll tighten them up just to make sure that they're not seized. Again, work my way off of the top deck. I'm just looking for any abnormalities or anything that might show a depression or a crack. Also inspect our deck hatches. This is definitely part of our storage area, but we want to make sure that our deck hatch covers are nice and pliable, and that our safety lines are actually attached as well, and that sometimes this is an area that'll break. We just want to inspect that and work our way to the sides, and we're going to check and see if everything is good from the bow all the way down. Again, running our hands over it, looking for any gouges that we might see. And I'm concentrating on the left side, and I will do the same thing on the right side. I want to inspect these screws. I'm definitely going to tighten these guys. These are the fasteners for the foot pegs that are in the inside, the foot peg mechanism. Work my way down the sides. The cockpit rim itself. Inspect this, make sure there's no sharp areas that could actually tear my spray skirt. Check these 2 bolts right here. These 2 guys are actually left side and right side are for the seat attachment, to be able to adjust those. Work my way through the back, starting again with the deck line. If the deck lines are frayed, like I said, we're going to definitely want to replace those. But we definitely want to make sure that if they're also very, very loose, that we go ahead and address how to tighten those. I'll talk about that in the safety equipment part in a little bit. So then what we're doing here is we're kind of working our way up the side as well and checking everything out, working our way back towards the stern. And then once we get to the stern, we'll go ahead and check our attachment hard point deck here. Another bungee for the rear toggle. Work our hands over the top and check the rear storage hatch cover. That looks pretty good. Just a couple of scratches on it, and also the day hatch. Same thing. All the points of attachment are patent, and the knots are good. So what I've done prior to starting this video was I actually washed the boat. And washing the boat for me was just basically hosing it down. The boat was pretty clean when it was in my garage being stored in my trailer. But if the boat is really dirty, what I suggest doing is warm water with a good car detergent, like blue coral is fine. That's actually something that's pretty easy on the boat. So the next step, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to treat the boat with 303 aerospace protectorant. So that's going to allow me to after I do my inspection on the right side and as well as the bottom, I am going to go ahead and treat the external shell or exterior shell with the 303. Think of it as kind of like marine grade Armor All. So like I said, I inspected the left side, my points of attachment. I'm definitely going to go ahead and check those, and I'm going to tighten those up with a Phillips head screwdriver. I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side, on the right side. And another thing that I want to do too is I want to look at the bottom of the boat. So I'm going to just kind of bring the boat over on its side, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to check for gouges. I got a couple of gouges here. So what I can do with these guys is pretty simple. I usually take a grater. It's almost like it's called a Sureform tool, and that's used in shaping of polystyrene. But what I'll do is I will go ahead and I'll knock down any high spots, and then I take a small torch, butane torch, and I just quickly flame these edges. And what that'll do is that'll drop all these edges down. So what I'm really, I mean, from a cosmetic standpoint, a lot of gouges are unsightly. A really gouged out boat is definitely going to cause you some speed deficit in terms of drag that's going to be increased. What we're really looking for is anything that shows as a crack. So fortunately, these boats are made out of low density polyethylene. These are really solid boats. Again, this is a Wilderness Systems Tempest. Want to give a shout out to my sponsor, Wilderness Systems. These boats are designed for a really long life. I've got some boats that are over 10 years old that are made with low density polyethylene. And as long as you take care of them, and what does taking care of them means washing them regularly, at least rinsing them every time you go out. And I'd say every 3 months at a minimum, spraying the entire boat down with the 303 protectorant. It's really going to help this plastic last a long time. So again, if the bottom shows any deficit in terms of really deep gouges, we can go ahead and knock those gouges down with that Sureform tool. And I'll send a picture of that in a separate feed. And like I said, flame it with a butane torch, and that'll cause these high spots to drop down. Right now, I'm not seeing anything that's too glaringly wrong here. I usually take a good look at my hull every couple of weeks. And now I'm going to go ahead and flip the boat over on the other side. So I'll catch you back in the next video. All right, guys, Greg back with you. So we're going to do a little work on this hull here. I did turn the boat over and I inspected the hull. I got the Sureform tool that I was talking to you guys about. I actually have that right in my hand. And this is a Sureform tool. You can buy this at Home Depot or Lowe's or any hardware store. Like I said, it's usually used for shaping blue foam. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this over the hull of my boat, and it's going to allow any high spots of plastic to gather inside the catch bin inside of this guy. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. So I'm not putting a lot of pressure on it. I'm just running it over the top. I'm noting any areas that might be a little on the high side as I'm running my hands over it, see if it might be a candidate to actually flame. But all I'm doing is I'm knocking down those high spots, feeling with my fingers, and I'll show you after I'm done with this all the individual pieces of low density polyethylene that I was able to catch inside this little bin. I'm just running it over the top. I'll go all the way from one end to the other. As I'm doing this, I'm also inspecting the hull for any deformities. So these boats, these low density polyethylene boats, are definitely prone to oil canning if they are not stored properly. If you store these with the hull down on spreader bars, after time the weight of the boat and gravity is actually going to cause depression areas. Those are known as oil. That's known as oil canning. Depending on how bad the oil canning is, you can actually fix that a couple of different ways. You can leave the boat out in the sun, and that will hopefully enable the memory of the mold to pop it back in. You could use hot water. You could use a heat gun, but if you can use a heat gun, that's like in extreme conditions, because if you're too close to it, you can actually burn or scorch the plastic. So I would say that's a last ditch effort there. Sand, like pool sand or play sand. If you put sand inside your boat and let that get nice and warm, that'll definitely help kind of level out those high spots. All these boats over time are going to get some oil canning. But what you really want to do is you want to make sure you don't have really deep gullies, because that's going to definitely interfere with the flow of the water on the hull, and it's definitely going to interfere how the boat tracks in the water for sure, and also create a lot of drag. So that's definitely one thing you want to do as you're going through this process of knocking things down, is keep your eye on the hull and look for those spots. And if you have any of those really deep depressions, think about how to get them out. All right, that's looking pretty good. So I'm going to bring this back to you so you can see what I've captured inside of it. Look at all that red plastic. So that's all from scratches and scrapes. And honestly, it's not super bad, but it's definitely gonna help. Definitely help with some of the resistance in the long term. So just wanted to show that to you. So the next step is, what are we gonna do if we've got a deeper gouge? And that's gonna be flaming it with a butane torch. So I'm gonna show you that right now. All right, this is a Burns-O-Matic. This guy's a handy dandy. If you guys have actually come on any trips with me, or done any type of classes with me that involve overnight, you know that I always have one of these things as a backup, because you can weld with these. Welding is another topic I will cover in another video. These boats can be welded if they are cracked, but the key is, by getting these gouges out initially, you're going to prevent the cracks from happening, okay? It's not a guarantee, but it definitely does help. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and isolate one of those areas, and I'm going to go ahead and flame it. So here's a good area right here. This is a little bit high. I can feel it with my fingers. I did go over it with my tool. I'm going to go ahead and start the torch. It's got to click on safety. And I'm just going to very carefully keep that above it, about 2 inches. It's not really super good to do this on a windy day, because you'll constantly be restarting your torch. But as you can see, what's happening is the plastic is starting to kind of fold back on itself as it gets heated. And all we're going to do is just keep working it over and over that one area, not staying in one spot too long. And what that's going to do is that actually causes the plastic to melt. This is a thermoform plastic, not a thermoset plastic, which means that it can melt and fall back on itself. And then we'll go ahead and just kick the torch off, and we'll let that go ahead and cool down. Don't throw cold water on it, just let it cool down naturally. And you can see that that spot actually is a little bit shinier where it's been flamed. So that once this is completely cool, I'll run my finger over it again, and it's not going to be standing up anymore. So I would definitely say, if you've got a lot of those all over your boat, that's definitely something you could do to help with some drag. All right, so I'm going to continue kind of just going over this hull a little bit more, and then I'm going to catch you guys back in the next video, where we're going to go ahead and treat the boat with 303. Okay, Greg back with you. So now that we got the hull dressed, we've got all those high spots cleaned up, and we've done a little bit of flaming. The next step is to go ahead and get the hull treated, and the entire boat treated for that matter, with the 303 aerospace protectorant. Here's the 303. It comes in several different sizes. I like to buy the gallon. It's the most economical. It's around $65. And then what I'll do is, this is my second season on this guy, so I'll transfer it to a small sprayer, and that way it's a little bit more easy to work with. So I like to use a smaller sprayer, and I also use a microfiber cloth. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to just start treating the hull, and I'll get the hull finished, and I'll work my way up to the sides and then to the deck. The nice thing about this stuff is you can use it on everything. All plastic surfaces, the bungees, the deck lines, everything will do very, very well with this stuff. It doesn't discolor the boat at all. It'll bring back a lot of luster, and it's also a UV protectorant. So I'm just going to go ahead and liberally spray this on the deck, the hull rather, and just kind of let this work its way over to the sides, working all the way up and all the way down. And I'm just going to let this soak in for a little bit. So usually I'll let that sit for a minute or so, and then I'll go ahead and I'll start to rub it down using the microfiber cloth. All right, so that's been about a minute, 2 minutes. Back with you. Got my microfiber cloth. My apologies for the external noise. I got a guy down the street who's doing a little pressure washing, so just bear with me. So what I'll do is I'll just start rubbing it in. And you can see that it's actually brought a lot of luster back into the plastic, but more importantly, this is serving as a protectorant for the plastic itself. UV, salt water, the environments that we work in, very, very inhospitable to materials. Even with stuff being stainless and LPD, low density polyethylene, we still want to make sure that we keep things clean and treated. It's a lot different with working in whitewater, where you're dealing with fresh water, but the policy is pretty much the same. So exactly what I did with treating the hull with that Sureform tool and flaming it, I do the same thing in my whitewater boats too. So that's a pretty good example of a crossover maintenance plan for either boats. So working my way down. I'm still with you. Okay. Awesome. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the boat over and do the opposite side. So you'll notice from my last video, the boats are resting on the supports that I built, and it's pretty easy to just grab the boat and flip the boat over. Makes maintenance a breeze. So now what I'm going to do is the same thing. Get my deck hatches open. Get my 303. And start spraying. I'm going to show you something too that you can use WD-40 for in a minute, especially if you transport your boat on your side. Every once in a while you're going to see you get black scuff marks from the rubber shoes on your, well, for me it's an Eno rack. WD-40 takes those scuffs out of the plastic pretty easy. You can't rub them out, but the WD-40 will definitely take it out. So I'm going to let this sit for about a minute, just like I did with the hull. All right, back with you. And just gonna rub this out again. Again, we're concentrating on the outside. I don't mind this getting on my bungees. I don't mind this getting on my safety line, on my deck lines on the side. Also referred to as static lines. We'll talk about that when we review safety equipment on the boat. So I'm just gonna get into all these depressions here. Make sure that everything's got a good rub down. Like I said, this boat was pretty clean when it was in my garage because I have a very, very strong habit of making sure that I wash my boats when I come back from either instruction or even just a leisure trip or a weekend for sure. It makes this type of maintenance a lot easier. So I'm just kind of working along the top, getting all the way around these side walls, these standoffs for our covers. Working to the stern. You can't see me, but I'm back here. Doing the same thing, just rubbing it in. Shining it up. It's looking good. It's amazing how this stuff makes your boat look after, especially if you haven't done it for a season. It really kind of restores that really brilliant, just out of the mold look of your plastic. You can also use this stuff on fiberglass too. I do have a fiberglass boat. I have a MDK Romney. That's kind of like my Sunday car. We'll talk about fiberglass in another episode. Right now I'm just concentrating on our LPDM boats. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and finish this guy up. Then we're going to talk about the cockpit and what we're going to look for inside the cockpit. And then we're going to talk about some storage and safety, and then we're going to do a little bit of work on our skeg. Catch you in a bit. All right, Greg back with you. Real quick, I wanted to show you one other part here. I've just got the whole boat pretty much all 303'd. It's looking pretty good. You can see how nice it's shining. I talked to you about using WD-40. So like, look, if you're on a desert island, the only thing you need is a can of this stuff and duct tape, and you've got the world taken care of. So what I'm gonna do with this is I've got an area right here. You might be able to see it. That black right there, I cannot scrub out with the 303. That's me putting this on my car. My car over there has the Eno rack on it, and it has the rubber shoes. So every once in a while I'll get this black scuff. So what I'll do is I'll take a little bit of 303 and I'll just put a little dollop of that right there, and then I'll rub it in with a cloth with a little water on it, and you can see, boom, it's gone. So this stuff is amazing for any of those trouble spots that you have on your boat, any staining that's caused by like plastic contact or something that you can't get off. It does not hurt the plastic at all. It will not mar the plastic finish. It'll not knock down the glossiness of the plastic. WD-40, good stuff. Hey, Greg back with you. All right, so we've finished the exterior. We've gotten ahead and we've treated the hull. We knocked it down, we flamed it. We went ahead with 303. We got the whole boat on the outside treated. We went ahead and we treated all of the hatch covers, both sides, and the insides as well, to make sure that those guys are properly coated. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go inside the boat, inside the cockpit, and we're going to go ahead and check things out in there. So let's do it. All right, so here we go. First thing we're going to do is we're going to check our seat. We're going to make sure that our seat padding is still patent. What I'm looking for is little things like these guys have a tendency to pop out, these plastic rivets. You can buy these at Tom's Kayaker. Harmony, you can get these directly if they pop out. But you just go ahead and make sure you should have 1, 2, 3, 4 of these guys. 1, 2, 3, 4 in a Wilderness System Tempest seat. Main thing I'm looking for is I'm looking for wear and tear, right? Because the seat gets a lot of abuse during the time that you use it for a season. One thing we also want to do is check all of the lines, all of the webbing that's attached to, this is single webbing, not tubular webbing. This stuff dry rots. So we want to make sure that this is cleaned. We're also going to treat this with 303 as well, because this does get exposed to the sun. You can actually spray the seat too with 303. I'm going to go ahead and do that after we do this. Looking at my seat pads to make sure that the seat pads are good. And I'm looking at my thigh braces, my thigh pads here. These are good too. They're in good repair. I'm going to check underneath here. I'm going to feel, these are my thigh hooks, so my thigh braces. Make sure that these are good and there's padding and there's no rips or tears. These things, depending on how much you roll and how much you kayak, will last many seasons. I usually replace these every third season, so these are on their second season, so they're doing pretty good. Really super easy to repair. If you want me to go over that, I can show you how to replace those. Looking inside the boat, what I'm doing is I'm checking in, and I'm going to look at both sides of my thigh hooks. I'm sorry, not my thigh hooks, my foot braces, and make sure that these guys track well. And they do, no problems there. So I'll check it on both sides. All right, so I'm pretty satisfied with what's going on in the cockpit right now. Any fasteners, I'll go ahead and I'll check and I'll adjust. One thing I definitely want to check is my bulkheads. So behind the seat, I'm going to go ahead and pop this down. Just move my hands. All right. Back here, bulkhead. So I know in this guy, this is mini cell foam. Right there, mini cell foam. And there's a bead that runs around the entire perimeter of this. This is an elastomer adhesive. So I noticed that my boat was getting some water in the back hatch, the day hatch. So I pushed this guy, and you can see that it's moving a little bit. So this is worn out. So this is going to be something that I'm going to go ahead and replace. Now I'm going to do that in another video. I will take out all the elastomer off of this. I'll pop this guy out, and I'll replace the adhesive around it. So I'm going to do that in another video. But like anything, it moves over time. But if you start finding water coming from your cockpit into your back hatch area, which in my case is the day hatch, see if you can wiggle this bulkhead on these LPDE boats. And if it moves, then it's a candidate to have that replaced. Again, I've had this boat for 3 seasons, so it's ready. All right, so I checked the one back here, and we can see that guy back there. I've done the same thing. I've checked this one. This one hasn't moved. It's pretty good. I do an inspection inside here. This is my stern, my rear hatch. I look all the way inside to see if everything's okay. The cable going into the skeg box is good. You can see that the cable actually tracks right here. And this is the, it's a nylon tube with a stainless wire that tracks through it. So that's not binding or cracked in any way. And then I'll walk around to the other side. And then as part of my cockpit check, I'll go ahead and look at the straps that allow me to lift up my legs. So this is the older outfitting. This is not the 2017 up. Has the integrated adjustment points directly up here where your knee well is, or your thighs are. I'll show that to you in another video, one of my newer boats. But this guy right here, I'll go ahead and make sure that these straps are patent. They're not binding, they're not dry rotted. I'll go ahead and I'll loosen them up. That way that I can get the seat down and make sure everything's tracking. I'll check the back band itself. I'll make sure that the back is showing that it's in good repair. There's no cracks in the plastic. And I'll also check all of the webbing to make sure that it's not fraying. The last thing you want this stuff to do is break on you when you're on a trip. It could be a real annoyance. All right, so everything's looking pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and sign off on this video. I'm going to go ahead and treat the inside of all these components with 303, spray the inside of the cockpit with 303, and then I'm going to get back to you and talk to you a little bit about the safety parts of our boat in terms of equipment, and then we're going to service the skeg. All right, Greg back with you. Now we're going to go ahead and service what I call a directional aid, which in our case is a skeg. I'm not going to go into the physics of how a skeg works. If you'd like to learn how to use your skeg, or if you're new to boating and you have a skeg, hit me up and I'd be more than happy to take you out and show you in windy conditions how this thing works. Generally don't like to teach with it, but it's definitely it's a good friend to have on those really blustery days when you're trying to lay down like 18 miles or so. So what you're looking at right here is the right side of the boat on the Wilderness system. Now, mindful of the fact that they changed the system, I believe in 2017 they started using bungee actuated skegs, which is the same as I have in my old NDK boat. But this particular one uses a tracking mechanism that uses a stainless steel cable that's about maybe 3/32 to almost 1/8 of an inch thick, that runs through a nylon channel all the way through the stern. There's a skeg box where the skeg actually sits. I'll show you that in a bit. But what we need to do is we need to lube the end of that attachment point of the cable to the skeg. There's a bend in the actual nylon tubing that leads to the skeg box, and that has a tendency to get gummed up with sand and pluff mud, and it can seize on you. With these older boats, with these actuators that are using stainless steel, they actually can bend at that actuation point, which is definitely something that we don't want to have happen, because once you get a bend in the stainless steel, you have to replace the entire length of stainless steel. So it's better to service it and not have that happen. So the first thing we want to do is we want to, first of all, make sure that it moves up and down, which it does. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen up the attachment screw here. This compresses the cable into the actuator itself, and what that's going to allow me to do in the back is to pull the skeg down. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to move this camera over a little bit so you can see that. So forgive the juggling as I move over. All right, just get this in frame. All right, so now you can see that the skeg is partially deployed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that down, give you a little bit better view. All right, so I'm going to loosen that up a little bit more. It's coming. It's slow. It's actually a little bit stuck in the actuator. Give me a sec. I got it. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. There's a lot of rust around that, but sometimes you just got to pull on it a little bit. It'll come down. All right, so that's going to allow me to do is bring this down. There we go. Much better. Okay, cool. So what I want to do is I want to get at least 6 inches of this area treated. What am I going to treat it with? Well, first of all, you notice I'm wearing gloves. I'm going to use a compound here. You can get this at any of your automotive stores. Permatex Anti-Seize aluminum lubricant. All right, so let's go ahead and get that in the frame. Perfect. So important to wear gloves. This stuff gets all over everything. So I treated this last season, and there's not a single trace of the anti-seize left on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get some of this anti-seize out. I'm going to put it on my glove, and I'm going to just coat that 6 inches on the bottom of the skeg with the anti-seize. Be liberal about it. Just going to make sure I get all that in there. A couple of shots will do it. All right, perfect. About 6 inches, and that represents where inside here, this area right here is your skeg box. The actual nylon tube that this cable rides in makes a bend right here, and this keeps this lubricated so it tracks nice and evenly when you deploy your skeg. All right, so I'm pretty satisfied with that there. I'm gonna go ahead and put the top back on this. All right, so at the top, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do the same thing in our area up top here. All right, right there. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to coat that. Now you can see that I've actually separated the cable from it by pulling it back. So I'm going to push this forward and the cable will come back through. Well, it should. All right. All right, I'm going to have to fish this one out a little bit because it's got some gunk on it. I'm going to go ahead and take care of that right now, and I'll be right back with you to finish this up. The joys of live TV. Okay, back with you here. So, what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you what I ended up having here. This is why you should be cleaning this stuff periodically. So, here is the cable. And as you can see, that this is the channel that leads from the skeg actuator all the way down the right side of the boat through the bulkheads into the skeg box in the back. And you can see that the end of this guy is rusty and has a lot of crud on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this guy up, and I'm going to go ahead and thread that back into the actuator channel itself. That'll clean it up nicely. I'm going to put that anti-seize on it, and then we can go ahead and button everything up and finish it. Just wanted to show you that I was able to get that off. I didn't have to take the seat pan out. All right, Greg back with you. All right, so what I needed to do was, in order to fix this, I just needed to be able to back off a little bit on that tube. I was able to get finally get that stainless steel cable out, and then I threaded it through the back end of this hole again here. So what I did was I treated about 7 inches, 8 inches back. You can see that it's got the anti-seize on it before I put it back into the actuator. And you can see now as I move the actuator, I'm gonna just kind of pan down at the skeg. Let's see if we can get that in focus. All right. You should see the skeg coming down. Let me see if I can get that in focus a little bit. It seems like it's out of focus. Still learning this gimbal. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so there you can see the skeg go up, come down, go up, come down. That's the perfect height. So if we ever get into a situation where the skeg gets fouled, so what would cause this to get fouled? Well, first of all, you got to keep it clean like anything else. We want to go ahead and wash this. We want to make sure we deploy this when we're hosing our boat off when we come back from a trip. Anything that gets caught up inside the skeg box, which runs inside of here, is going to hold this thing in place. I've had everything from, I would say probably the most common thing that I've had is pluff mud. Pluff mud is really, really, really tenacious in terms of getting inside the skeg box. So what you want to do is make sure when the boat's over, you really kind of lay into it with your hose, and then you deploy this thing up and down several times to make sure that it tracks evenly. It should track evenly, and it should not bind. So I'm moving this thing up and down with my fingers, and I'm watching the actuator up there effortlessly track in and out of its channel. If it binds and you force it, it's going to bend the cable, and if the cable gets bent inside that nylon channel, you're going to have to replace the entire cable, which is a pain in the butt. So if you just keep this clean, it's not going to bind up on you. If this does get stuck and pretty good with pluff mud or shells or sand, what you can do is you can take a pair of these guys, these angled needle nose pliers. You can grab the back end of the skeg. I'll just grab the back end of the skeg lightly and pull it down. That'll help free it up. Other than that, it's going to be like mud in there. So it's not going to come out. So that basically is how we service our skeg, and luckily I get to do this on another 6 boats. But I figured I'd show you how to do it on this one. And yeah, we had a little hiccup because sometimes that top end that fits into the actuator gets full of gunk. So it was a little bit tough to get it out, and it was certainly a little bit tough to get it back in, but we cleaned it up. All right, so next up is going to be just kind of go over the safety equipment on the boat, and then we'll call it a day. All right, Greg, back at you. So safety and storage. So obviously, safety for me, when I think about operations on my boat, in terms of things that I want to make sure that I have that are in good repair, are definitely going to be these static lines, also known as deck lines. So a lot of folks say, well, what's the difference? Well, the static line means that it's not dynamic. It's not going to have a lot of give. It does stretch a little bit, unlike the bungees. So when you're doing a rescue, especially any type of a deep water rescue, and if somebody's holding onto your boat or using these deck lines to cowboy up, if you haven't done a deep water rescue class, hit me up. I'll be more than happy to put one together. But they're going to want to be able to pull on something that's not going to flex like a bungee, right? So that's why these lines need to be in good repair, and they also need to be taut. So this guy, you can see, has a little bit of play in it. I would say that's about 1 inch of play, and that's about what I like. So how do I control that? I control that with the stopper knot at the end here. So when this starts getting a little bit too loose, and they do stretch over time, what I'll do is I'll back this nut off here, this screw, and I'll just loosen this detent. I'll take a pair of needle nose vice grips, and I'll lock it behind the nut, break the nut, retie it, tightening it up, and then I cinch this back up again, this nut and screw here, and that tightens the whole thing up. The same goes through for here. So you'll also notice that I've got a little bit of an apparatus. I have an apparatus here, and this is kind of just for towing purposes. I made this out of materials that I got from where did I get this? The marine place over here in Mount Pleasant, West Marine, I think that's what it is. Anyway, these guys are really good carabiners. These are stainless carabiners. So this whole thing is about 6 feet long. I consider this to be safety equipment because this guy is always on my boat, and it allows me to tow or to do a side tow or assisted tow for an injured boat or an incapacitated boat. So I always make sure that I check this into safety equipment. I make sure that the carabiners are free and actuate. I make sure that they're treated with 303, and also I make sure that I use WD-40 on any of the actuating mechanisms themselves so that they are protected. Super easy to make. I want to say probably about $60 worth of material. The most important aspect of this was the quality of these stainless steel carabiners. I will put together another video on how to make these, but I definitely recommend having these on the boats if you're going to do any type of trip leading or find yourself in a position where you need to tow somebody back in. These are really, really handy to have and easy to make. So again, I would check the deck lines on the left side and right side of the boat. If I need to make any adjustments, I'll go ahead and make the adjustments on these stopper nuts. And so storage, like I said, I go ahead and I clean out clean up my storage area. I make sure that these areas are clean, free of debris. I do clean them every time I do go out, and I treat them with 303. Like I said, I check the bulkheads. We talked about that earlier. I check the bulkheads in the rear one. We know that the one in my day hatch, this is the one between my cockpit and my day hatch. This one I need to fix. And then the front one too, in the storage area, same thing. I cleaned this guy out with 303, and I double checked to make sure that the bulkhead there was okay, and that one is nice and patent, so I don't have to worry about fixing that. All right, so we've covered pretty much everything on our shopping list, and let's go take a look at what we've got. So we started out with exterior shell. All right, so we went ahead and we dressed that. We knocked down any of the high spots on the hull. We flamed it. We treated the whole boat with 303, so we're going to put an X there. Interior cockpit area, we checked that out. We looked at the seat. We looked at all the mechanisms that hold that in place. We looked at the thigh hooks. We looked at the thigh pads. We looked at all of the webbing to make sure that none of that was dry rotted. All the detent points, as well as the foot pegs, and making sure that those track okay. We cleaned that out, so we're going to go ahead and give that a check there. Safety and storage we just did. We checked out the deck lines again, told you how to tighten those up. If they are frayed, replace them. Keep them treated with 303 and they'll last a good long time. We checked the storage area to make sure that those are free and clear. Make sure that the cockpit, the lids for the storage areas are treated with 303 and they're not cracked or dry rotted. So we'll go ahead and give that a check mark. And then the last thing was a direction light on our boat was the skeg. We went ahead and lubed the last 8 inches of the line leading into the skeg, as well as the 8 inches going into the actuator. All right, so we covered a lot today. Simple boat maintenance, honestly. Like I said, I get to do it again for 14 more boats, so lucky me. But if you think about it, as long as you're keeping up with this on a routine basis, when you're coming in and you're going out, you're making sure that everything works before you put it in the water. When you come back, you wash the boat off with copious amounts of clean water. You actuate that skeg. Monthly, you go ahead and treat the boat with 303. You keep in touch with your boat and you keep up with your maintenance. You're going to find that A, it's going to be easier on your wallet, and B, you're not going to find yourself having to deal with something out when you're paddling that is either broken or malfunctioned. All right, so that's a lot to cover. Any questions or comments, please leave them in the video. And like I said, if there's any instructional information that I can give you or any areas that you would like me to expand upon, please feel free to email me or give me a call, and I'll be more than happy to get you more information on that. Cheers.